Thank you. Thanks a lot for kind of giving me the chance to kind of speak today and speak at this important event. I'm really happy to have the chance. I'm the acting general secretary of the IUF. IUF is the a global federation of workers representing workers in food processing, hospitality, fast food, and agriculture, sectors that are extremely where we see a lot of sexual harassment. I think everybody has seen the Panorama documentation that exposed serious sexual exploitations within the tea plantations in Africa and Asia. We heard the statistics from Lorna earlier around the number of sexual harassment in the hospitality industry, something that I saw myself when I was working in the hospitality industry in Nordic countries, where we saw the similar numbers. 60, 70, 80% of the workers had been exposed to sexual harassment during the work time. So this is something that is clearly a highly prioritized subject of the IUF. I'm really happy to have the chance to speak to you today. So I would like to kind of like highlight some of the importance behind the ILO Convention 190 and the recommendations that came out of that recommendation 206. So I think when the International Labour Conference adopted those instruments, it sent a clear message. It sent a clear message that violence and harassment in the world of work are no longer acceptable. And importantly, gender-based violence and harassment must be addressed with special urgency. I mean, we are talking about this is a serious issue. It needs to be addressed now. We cannot wait. This is, however, a shared responsibility. It's not only the trade unions that need to take responsibility here. We also know that employers need to be accountable, and they need to take their shared responsibility. But governments have a very important role as well to put in place the right framework and right legislation to make sure that everybody is protected, but we make sure that we can end all sexual abuse and sexual harassment in the workplace. So sexual harassment is not just a moral or legal issue. It is a health and safety issue, which has been highlighted by our colleagues earlier today. And in sectors like hospitality, fast food, agriculture, and food processing, where IUF is active, and especially among women, they face some serious issues when it comes to the employment contracts. And this is, for example, or employment in general, precarious work. It has been raised by Claire King. Precarious contracts is a serious issue when it comes to sexual harassment. Isolated work environments, many people that work in isolated work environments, they are more likely to be sexual harassed. And then when people are in a situation where we see power imbalances, for example, people working in hospitality, where we have third-party harassment quite frequently, where we talk about the customer always right, or we have culture of tipping and our workers relying on tips, we see much more likely to see sexual harassment. But if people have secure working conditions and do not need to rely on the customer paying part of their salaries on how they behave. So there's power imbalances are taken out of the question. So in a way, the C190 was a groundbreaking ILO convention, recognizing that gender-based violence is an occupational hazard. And it causes as well psychological and physical harm. It's not only this is serious issue for the employees and the employers. They have a duty, as I said, and accountability to prevent it. But they should also not only, as we said, the campaigns is not only prevent it, but they should end it. And there should be zero tolerance towards sexual harassment in the workplace. So, what has happened, or what are the unions doing? I mean, I think we have come a long way. A decade ago, many employers, even some trade unions, dismissed that sexual harassment was an issue, and they saw it as a private matter between two individuals. But trade unions did not wait for the Me Too campaign, or kind of like the revolution, because we had already seen many of our affiliates take action way before we saw this Me Too revolution. We saw campaigns in the US, for example, hands off, hands on, with our member unions in hospitality union Unite here in the US, organized for hotel housekeepers in Chicago, because they had been seen a lot of sexual harassment among hotel housekeepers. Lorna mentioned the Not on the Menu campaign in the UK. We run a similar campaign in the Nordic countries as well, and we work very closely together with the Unite on developing these campaigns together. And it was an important campaign to protect workers in the hospitality industry against third-party violence and make sure that we created a zero tolerance policies within our workplaces. But IUF has also been negotiating with transnational companies, several of groundbreaking global agreements with companies like Chiquita, Sodexo, Unilever, and several other large hotel chains on sexual harassment to both protect the workers, but also to make sure that we get and see an end to. And this is all possible because of workers' testimonies from housekeepers, migrant workers in agriculture, and precarious workers who bravely spoke out, just like Lorna did and explained earlier. It is important for us unions to create an environment that we make sure that our workers are able to speak out. And we've seen results. We've seen results in countries like Ghana, Indonesia, and Uganda, where we've seen unions negotiate workplace policies and collective bargaining agreements using the ILO Convention 190 as a reference point to make sure that they get through those agreements. And we have used this, IUF has used it, for example, in our negotiation with large hotel chains such as Rio Hotels, Spanish hotel chains, where we have, among others, negotiated mandatory sexual harassment training for all workers, created a position of trusted persons groups where people can confine in, and confidential case tracking as well within that company. And these are not just policies, they are actually tools for cultural change at Rio Hotels across the globe. And we are working very closely with the Rio Hotels company chain to make sure that those policies are being implemented closely at every workplace around the globe. So what must be done, to make sure that this tool, the ILO Convention 190, is a powerful tool for workers? So I would like to highlight several actions that both governments, employers, and trade unions need to take to fully make sure that the workplaces are free from gender-based violence. So first of all, governments must ratify the Convention 190 and Recommendation 206. But it's not enough to ratify the convention. It needs to be implemented. I think it was highlighted earlier that it has been ratified in the UK, but it isn't implemented. It's the implementation that is just as important as the ratification. We must also identify, the government needs to identify high-risk sectors and take special measures in sectors like hospitality and agriculture. And it is also important for government to recognize the impact of domestic violence in all of this on work, and provide protection with leaves and flexible arrangement for people that are victims of domestic violence. So what does employers need to do? Well, they need to treat sexual harassment as a health and safety issue. They need to do risk assessment that include precarious work and gender risks. They need to implement zero tolerance policies and ensure a safe reporting mechanism in their workplaces. And then what do we as trade union need to do as well? There are a lot of things that we need to do. We must continue to organize, educate, and also negotiate good agreements that take into account sexual harassment and make sure that we have good provisions in workplace agreements, but also sectoral agreements, which make sure that sexual harassment is treated in a correct manner. We need to push for secure direct employment. And this is a point that was raised earlier. Precarious work is a serious problem when it comes to sexual harassment. And that's why we need to make sure that we see more direct employment, zero hours contract and other forms of precarious employment contracts are a risk factor when it comes to sexual harassment and increase the risk for, as I said, increase the sexual harassment risk. And we need to use the Convention 190 to build power and protect members, especially women. And finally, we need to take the lead as well. We need to show that we do not tolerate sexual harassment. It has been talked about that sexual harassment was rife in the UK Parliament. Unfortunately, sexual harassment has also been quite rife within our own trade union movement. And I would like to highlight that IUF now in May adopted a new IUF sexual harassment policy for itself and its affiliates, where we demand that our affiliates implement certain measures and make sure that sexual harassment is not taken lightly within our own structures, because we see examples every day, every week about sexual harassment cases within our own movement. Just to mention that only last week, the leader of the largest trade union movement in Norway left his position because of sexual harassment. So this is an issue that is very ripe within our own movement and something that we need to take the lead on. We cannot accept sexual harassment within our own structure. Final reflection, and let's remember that Convention 190 and 206 affirm that everybody has right to work free from violence and harassment. And just imagine a hotel worker that does not longer need to fear harassment from guests. Imagine a worker supported by her union and employer when they're facing domestic violence. Imagine a workplace where dignity, safety, and equality are non-negotiable. And this is the power of Convention 190. It's not just a legal instrument, it's a tool that can change lives. And let's make sure it doesn't remain on paper. Let's implement it, live it, and fight it together. Thank you.